Notre Dame fans, welcome back to another edition of the Irish Breakdown Podcast. It is Sunday night. Vince, that's Vince, by the way. Vince Adair, our football analyst at irishbreakdown.com. My name's Brian Driscoll. I'm the publisher. And Vince left. Apparently, he was upset that I did not intro him first, and so he left. But we are going to talk about the Notre Dame. I said you left because you were mad that I didn't introduce you right away. Vince is our football analyst at Irish Breakdown. I'm the publisher. And this is our Upon Further Review podcast. And we both are able to dive into the film. And what we like to do in this show is not just regurgitate the same things last night. Sometimes we will re-emphasize, hey, I thought this last night, and I still feel that way, especially about controversial things or things that people may tend to disagree on, like my take on the defensive game plan. That's going to be something a lot of people don't agree with when we get to it. But then also offer some things that, and this is coming from a football coach's standpoint. When every game I've ever coached in that I can remember, there are things that I thought happened during the game, sometimes minor, sometimes kind of major, where you say, I felt one thing live, but then when I went back and watched it, I felt a different way because I realized, okay, they were doing something that we hadn't seen or something that we weren't prepared for, or they were doing something different. And you always have those kind of takes. And so that's what we like to do with this show. So Vince, let's dive into it. And I think big picture, nothing really changed from our stance. What the game meant, it was still a good win. Mm-hmm. When every weekend, here's the thing that I don't like. I'm frustrated that this team isn't better. Okay. I'm just going to say it. But I think that some people who are much more frustrated than I am, I feel like we have to take a step back and say, look at college football this year. When you're winning, it's a success. And yes, it's sloppy and things got to change. But there are things that definitely have to change for Notre Dame if they're going to keep winning out. But with the nature of college football in 2021, winning ultimately is the key. And so that's the big picture take for me. Now, what we're going to do is take the coaches' look at it and say, yes, it's great that they won, but to keep the winning ways going, they have to improve in some other areas. So let's dive first, Vince, into the offense. Yeah. You had a chance to kind of go through and break the game down a little bit more. Game plan wise, let's just kind of talk about just the overall strategy after breaking down the film, digesting it, thinking it through. Overall big picture, how did you feel about the manner in which Notre Dame went after attacking you in North Carolina last night?
Well, I think they kind of took a page out of the North Carolina playbook, to be honest with you, with as many RPOs as they ran, the obvious RPOs that they ran.
Can you explain that? Because you and I talked about that beforehand. When you say obvious RPOs, explain what you mean by that.
Well, and it's almost, I say obvious because a lot of times you see an RPO live and you can pick it out better than I can. But as I was watching the game and I was taking my notes as we were going and when going back, it was like, oh yeah, there's an RPO. Oh, there's an RPO. Like it's very clear because if you watch the quarterback's face, right, his helmet, where he's looking as he's going to hand off the ball. Okay, that's number one. That's your number one tell. Okay, if he's not looking at the running back and he's looking at a read, okay, that's an obvious RPO situation. Okay. Also, your next tell, and which is what I was doing most of the time live, is I was watching the wide receivers. I was watching the outside. And so when it's a straight run, the wide receivers are blocking, right? If it is an RPO, they're running routes. And so if the wide receivers were running routes and they handed the ball off, ding, 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 it's an RPO, right? I mean, with very small margin for error, right? There were so many more opportunities where Jack Cohn specifically was running RPOs. And I also thought that there were many more times that not only was he running an RPO, but he was doing the P of the RPO a lot more, right?
Right.
That's why Styles got involved. That's why, Davis got involved, right? A lot of those.
One was with Buckner, right?
One was with Buckner, absolutely. But that's why they were hitting those screens and some of that short stuff on the outside. Those are RPOs, right? And the overhang man, the guy that was splitting the difference between the slot receiver and the end of the line of scrimmage, he did not play it well. And they took advantage of him. And I don't know if that's something that they saw on film or what,
It is. I would assume it is based on watching North Carolina's defense, which is a comment I made last night, Vince. I'm shocked that North Carolina's defense is as bad at defending RPOs as they are,
because they see it every day in practice.
Every day.
I mean,
it'd be like Navy's defense not knowing how to stop the triple option,
right? Because watching North Carolina,
they're as good as it
the week leading up to it.
Country.
Yeah, they clearly run RPOs. That's a staple in their offense, and it's clear and obvious, right? And so that they're doing that in practice.
They rank in my top 10 of effective RPO scheme, effectiveness, all that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And they don't have great personnel.
Right.
I mean, they don't.
And Notre Dame literally took a page out of their playbook, in my opinion, and they ran it right at them, and it was effective all night long. And so I appreciated that. And I think it's, they're not just mimicking, UNC, obviously, but that can highlight what their guys can do well. Okay. And it also masks what they don't do well. Okay. Right. And obviously I'm talking about the offensive line offensively. So I really liked it. I thought it was the most.
Which means what? Explain that. Because I think I understand what you mean by that. But when you say what the offensive line does well and doesn't do well, explain what you mean by that.
Yeah. So the offensive line, and watching it back, last night we thought that, and we felt that their pass pro was pretty decent, right? I think you thought it was better than I thought live.
But I thought it was really good.
Yeah, right. And I think you've come back to the pack just a little bit on that.
Quite a bit, actually. Yes.
Okay. All right. Fair enough.
It was much better on the deeper drop backs.
Right.
But there was a lot of times in this game where they were like first play of the game.
Yeah.
There was in the first drive also, the 3rd and 6 to Kevin Austin.
Yep.
Notre Dame's line just let a dude run free. Just didn't touch him.
And that happened more often than
he got drilled as soon as he threw the ball. But he stuck in the pocket good. Man. This is something that he got hit a lot more last night than I realized.
Yes. That's exactly right.
And just, because once the ball's gone, like you, I kind of watch the secondary, and once the ball's gone, I'm looking at the routes and seeing where the ball's going. I'm not seeing Jack Cohn get drilled in the face.
And he has gained some serious confidence in the past.
He's
couple
so
of games.
Comfortable, and then kind of back to the original thing, Vince. That's the thing that I found most heartening about last night and really the last 2 games. It is so clear that Jack Cohn is 100% on board, and he feels like they're building around him finally.
Yes,
that's definitely something that
I was more impressed with Jack Cohn watching the film back than I even was live. And I thought he had a good game. I did. I thought he had a good game. Okay. But he stood in and he stepped into a few throws and then just got,
drilled,
just smacked. Right.
Yeah.
And that, you don't do that if you're not confident in what you're doing and in the throws that you're making and things of that nature. So I
also think it shows that he's got more confidence in the line. Yeah. Because they have given him more time the last couple games. He's not looking for that. That's what he did the first couple games. If you remember, the first couple games of the year this year, he got hit a lot, but he had at least enough confidence in the line that he would stand in, not look for the hits.
It was almost like
the ball.
It's almost like it was like ignorant confidence. Like, because he hasn't been behind that.
Like, hey, I know I'm going to get hit, but the timing of the off. And this is what we talked about. Like early in the year, they were pushing the tempo more. Florida State, he got hit several times. I think of the wheel route he threw on was it one of the first couple plays of the game against Toledo?
Okay.
Right. It was against Toledo. Do a wheel route to Michael Mayer. Remember that one? And he got drilled. There's no way he saw the ball get caught, which I've joked before with you where, I said the best pass I ever threw in my college career, I didn't see. It was against Frostburg State. We're playing in Raven Stadium, and I throw the ball, and the guy just hits me under my chin. So I'm laying on my back. Our crowd's on that side. Their crowd's on that side. And I'm just kind of, which one's going to start yelling? And our crowd started yelling. So I was like, okay, he caught it. Cool. That's happened to Jack Cohn several times this year, and it happened to him last night. That's okay, because that tells me even though he's getting hit, it's not rattling him, because he's confident enough in the line that they're going to give him protection and more often than not. And I think that's where I felt better about their pure drop backs. Yeah. They were handling that. Their quick game and RPO protections, not RPO protections, play action protections, to me were a little bit shakier.
Shaky. Yeah, I agree.
Especially the quick game. So they're not handling those. So what North Carolina was doing, and this is something I didn't recognize as much watching live, North Carolina actually ran a lot more twists and stunts than I thought they did live. Now, a twist is essentially Right. Real quick one. So, like, this defensive lineman is going to go here, and this guy's going to loop around him, or a defensive lineman is going to go here, and the linebacker is going to come right behind him.
Right.
They
and
did
when it's
more
two
of
defensive
that.
linemen, it takes a little bit longer. So that's why I said delayed.
Yeah.
Because when he goes here and then he has to loop all the way around and come over, so it feels like it's delayed. And it's done that on
They were
purpose.
hitting them quick early, and it was getting they backed away from that later in the game.
Understand why?
Because Cone was just picking them apart.
Yeah, that's true.
It's like
because they had some free guys coming at him.
Yeah,
he was getting rid of the ball so fast it didn't make a difference. Yeah.
So I thought that was a positive. I thought the RPO thing, Vince, too. It's leaning into who you are. That's the most encouraging thing. One thing we talked about before the game was, and we have a couple super chats here, Vince. I want to get to Daniel Wade with the super sticker. Thank you very, very, very much for that, Daniel. I appreciate that. We also have one from Christ Built 1218 with a big super chat. I appreciate that very, very much. Want to get to you all before we dive too much further into this. Jim K with another super chat. Thank you, Jim. I love the way you guys break everything down for all of us. Keep up the great work, Bryan and Vince. We will definitely do that.
Yes, we will.
Y'all are paying us to break down film and give you our thoughts. I mean, we would do it for free. But
and we were for a while.
I joke, but we appreciate it so much. Absolutely. And Dennis Rydell says, wasn't the offense too conservative in the first half last night? Styles needs to play more. That's the one I wanted to get to.
Yes,
that he just brought up.
That's a great segue. Yeah.
As I broke down the game, I actually don't think it was conservative. I did at the time. I don't think it was. I think the lack of downfield shots made me feel like it was too conservative when I watched it live. But when I went back and watched what North Carolina was doing, which is number one, playing a little bit tighter outside but softer inside, they were just giving away the quick outs and those type of things. They were playing a lot of cover 2 to the field and at times to the boundary, which means they're taking over top. Basically, North Carolina by alignment was trying to say, we're not going to let you beat us deep. And so Notre Dame just said, fine, we're going to nickel and dime you and just move right down the field.
Right.
And that's part of the reason Jack Cohn scored in that long run. Now, you and I have debated and we have agreed to disagree about whether or not he should have thrown it to Michael Mayer. And the response you said was, well, he would have hit it for a first down. It doesn't go for a touchdown. A bad response would be, well, Jack Cohn scrambled for because you don't know that he's going to scramble for a touchdown.
Right.
You still, if the read is there, you throw the ball.
Right.
Right. But I still feel like the safety over top with the linebacker coming over, I didn't love that throw. As a quarterback, I don't know if I would have loved that throw. But the point is,
right,
that's an example of them playing off, taking away the deep shots, which opened up Jack Cohn on the 21-yard scramble.
Absolutely. Yeah, right.
And that's my point, is I felt like it was almost, if I were to say it was conservative, it would make me a bit hypocritical because I've always said, attack the weaknesses of what they're doing.
That's what they were allowing you to do.
Just like Notre Dame's defense did the same to Carolina, which we'll get to. I felt like Carolina was protecting against the deep ball a little bit more. I felt like Notre Dame did a good job of finding the soft spots, even little things like stacking Avery Davis and then releasing them both, and then Avery just goes finding soft spots. He hits a little 6-yard pass that turns into 20. I'll take that. Right. And what he was doing is he was giving his guys opportunities to catch and make plays. And sometimes they did, sometimes they didn't. I mean, look, a 40-yard pass is a 40-yard pass, whether you throw a go route that the guy catches in stride or you throw an RPO to Lorenzo Styles that he takes for 40. Right. A 40-yard gain is a 40-yard gain.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt like those were there more than the deep shots were there. And the other thing is Carolina, as we talked before the game, has big physical corners, and they used that to their advantage. Notre Dame picked on Don Chapman a little bit more when he was in the game, which I was happy to see. That they started kind of, hey, the starter, that's not Tony Grimes. Let's take advantage of that matchup. Where I would have liked to see them be more aggressive, even in the second half, was I felt there was more there over the middle that they could have gone to. They hit the seam to Mayer. They hit the deep cross to Styles. That's an area where I would like to see them be a little bit more aggressive. But overall, I didn't feel it was. So I felt they could have been more aggressive, but I don't think that equals too conservative, if that makes sense.
Yeah, what I will say, and this kind of complements what you were saying or enforces what you were saying. They were running a lot of clear out routes and then bringing somebody underneath on the outside. And it was clear that to me, especially rewatching it, that they were very worried about those deep routes. And they would almost double team the guys that were going deep, which left those guys underneath wide open. And the linebackers weren't getting enough width, or that wasn't their responsibility, one of the two. And they were allowing a lot of those underneath throws, those quick outs, those slides, things of that nature. They were open all night long, and they were doing it from different formations, and they were doing it from some motion and some things like that. They were getting actually a little bit creative, but they were still hitting the same concept over and over. It felt like clear it out, get somebody underneath, and they hit that guy underneath all night long. And I agree with you. It's because North Carolina was so worried about that deep throw that they were allowing the underneath stuff.
Which I didn't understand because Notre Dame hasn't been real successful with that lately.
No, they haven't. I agree with that.
So if they were watching Toledo, Florida State film, then I would have understood that. But that's not an area where Notre Dame has been super, super strong lately. So
yeah.
Vince, let's talk about quarter. You had some thoughts on the quarterback rotation, the usage. I didn't mind it as much. I was fine with it. I can maybe nitpick a little bit, but you had some stronger opinions on that. Do you want to share kind of your thoughts on it?
There was one series that I didn't like specifically. There was a couple of them, but the one specifically after North Carolina scored to bring it to 27-31. They start the next series off, and they've got Buckner in the game, and then they have a false start, and then they bring Cone in. Right. And that felt a little disjointed. And then there was another series where they had Buckner in. Here it is. It's the fourth offensive series of the game. And it was in the first half. And it was right after North Carolina went to tie it at 10-10. Okay. Buckner comes in to first play. They're on the 25. It was a touchback, obviously. And I wrote, do not like this. Okay. They had Buckner in for the first play. They run the ball. And after that first play, and they didn't get much on it, right? They bring in Cone, and now he's in on second down. And I just that just felt disjointed to me, and I don't like that. It felt to me that the quarterback plan didn't feel as specific this week as it did last week. And I really liked it last week. I thought it flowed nicely, and I thought it was obvious when Buckner was going to come in. It just felt a little disjointed to me. Now, look, it worked, and I don't necessarily mind the changeup at times. But if you're going to bring Buckner in on first down of the first play of a drive, then leave him in for a little while. Like, don't bring in Cone and put him behind the 8 ball after first down isn't successful, because they give you 3 downs for a reason. You know what I mean? And now you've only given Cone 2. And to Cone's credit, he comes in and he hits Mayer for a first down on that particular drive. So I mean, it was a post. Right. It was a post to Mayer, but again, I just didn't like it. Right. So I want it to be more defined, Brian. That's where I really want, because I don't mind the 2 quarterback thing. I really don't. Right. I think it works for them. They found something.
Well, it's something we've advocated for them doing since the summer. So I would hope that we would. Yeah. When we had our issue with it early in the season is the way they were doing it. It's like they would just bring, okay, Tyler, here's your series, and then Jack Cone could go 20 real life minutes without being on the football field. Right. And it's kind of like, what do you talk about during games all the time? Right. TV announcers, man, this long drive, boy, the offense has been on the field for a while. Well, they were doing that to Jack Cone and then to Tyler Buckner, both of them, and then saying, okay, now go run the offense. And to me, that didn't make a lot of sense.
Yeah, it was rough. And I honestly, I just don't like the Buckner thing at the beginning of a series, right? I don't like the one play and then Cone comes back in if it's not successful. It
depends on the play. It depends on the play you want to go. The reason. Well, let me allow you to explain why you don't like that.
Yeah, I think it not necessarily that it breaks the rhythm, because I would be okay if you bring Buckner in on like a 3rd and 2, right? And then you bring Cone back in after he picks up the first down, like that kind of, I would be okay with that, unless you're trying to take a shot or whatever. But because that's a defined role. Okay, short yardage situation, we're bringing in Tyler. Cone knows it. here we go. You know what I
Right.
mean? Like that would be a defined role. I don't feel like the first play of a series and then you bring him out for the second play is a defined role. That's my biggest issue with it.
Right. For me, I think I don't mind it so much if there's a specific play you want to start with. My issue with is that I think it's harder to go tempo when you're rotating a quarterback. And if you know you're going to rotate a quarterback. Now, the other part of it too could be is they could have a potential, if this works for X, we're going to go with play 2. But if we don't get it, then we're going back to so like if you have a call on 1st and 10, right? And hey, if we get 5+ yards, we're going to go right. We're going to go tempo and we're going to run this with Tyler still in there. If it goes for less than 5 yards, we're going to then go to the next call for me is going back to our base and doing that. That could be part of it too, I think, but it makes it harder to get your tempo going. Like, what if the first play works? You want to hustle up and get lined up again, right? Well, if your plan is to just take Tyler out the next play, so that's what I would say is I would only dislike it if I knew that no matter what happened on that play that they were going to go to cone. I don't like it. If the result of that play would have been, okay, if it works, we're going to keep rolling, but if it doesn't, we're going to go to Jack. Because you know this, Vince. I mean, a lot of coordinators are going to script out, like we talk about the pregame script. A lot of good coordinators will kind of do a semi-script for themselves on the next drive. Okay, I want to start off with this, this, and this.
Right.
But
because they're working on that while the team's on defense. You know what I mean? Now, they're like, okay, what was working? That kind of thing.
The difference is you don't sit down there with the offensive line and say, or the offense and say, okay, here's the 5 plays. You may say, hey, look, we're going to start with this. I'm thinking I want to attack this next series, and here's a couple things I'm thinking.
There's been times, and I know it's college, right? It's different than high school, but like there were times as a high school coordinator, I would talk to a trusted person, right? It could be one of my offensive linemen, it could be the quarterback. Hey, man, what did you like? Like, what's working right now? What do you guys like? And if it was an O lineman, of course, they would want to run the ball, which is fine. But like, what's working for you guys? What are you feeling? And then I would try to incorporate that. You know what I mean?
I'm pretty sure Tommy Reese does that with his quarterbacks.
I'm sure.
But the other thing is too is sometimes you're going to tell them what you like. Hey, this next series, I really want to go after number 4, right? So here's where my play calls are. Here's what I'm thinking. Yeah. If we do this, then I want to take this shot. One of the greatest, which I would encourage any fan to watch, is watch some of the NFL films of the Super Bowl 33, Broncos and Falcons. They've got this great segment where Denver's up 10-3. Falcons are going on a long drive. That whole time that they're on the sideline, Gary Kubiak and Mike Shanahan are looking at the plays and they're like, okay, Eugene Robinson's doing this. I think we can beat him with this, but how are we going to do it? And they spent this whole time coming up with that play. And then the Falcons went down. It was 10-6. The Falcons went down. Morton Anderson missed a field goal. They ran this bootleg post because Eugene Robinson, who had picked Elway off the year before in the Super Bowl playing for the Packers, was now at the Falcons, was biting hard on this certain move Rod Smith was doing. And so this whole time while the defense is on the field, they're scripting this play that they wanted to take a shot. And of course it goes for an 80-yard touchdown. Right. That's what happens in between series.
Right.
Now, at the NFL level, it's a little different because you're involving the Hall of Famer that's going to throw it a little bit more, maybe than you would Jack Cohn, or Tyler Buckner, or Drew Pine.
Fair enough.
That's what happens. And so you'll script it out. So I think sometimes that might be part of it too. And hey, I really want to run this play to start the drive off with, but we only repped it with Tyler during the week of practice. It could be something like that too. So there could be circumstances where I'd be okay with it.
Yeah.
But just overall, if it's just run the play and then bring them out, I don't love that.
Yeah.
Like you. I guess I'm just more willing to say,
and you may be right. And if that's the case, okay. Like I could get on board with that. It just, to me, it felt disjointed to somebody that's not on the headset. And I don't know what their game plan is there, obviously. But yeah, that's a good point.
And that should always be taken into context. So like when we talk about the touchdown that they gave up on the pump fake, the defense, we're going to talk about that. We think someone's responsible. There's a chance the coverage could have been something different and that person's not correct. The point is somebody missed it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
So there's always room for that. Offensive line, Vince. Let's talk about the O-line.
Please.
So I was coming out of it I still feel like the offensive line is certainly improved. And I still feel good about the fact that I felt for 60 minutes in the run game, they kept a body on a body, and they didn't work their feet. Here's the thing. We've talked about they need to drive through contact, work their feet through contact. We saw that a little bit more last night, but a lot of it's just kind of pitter patting. They're not actually getting movement. It's just kind of moving your feet, not driving your feet. And that's why I don't think they're getting any movement.
Yeah.
It's because they just kind of hit and then just kind of pick their feet up.
It's not a drive.
There's a like, okay, here's the thing. Like, let's say, you know, you're trying to move a car. Okay. If you just put your hands on it and then just start like kind of jogging, you're not going to move the car.
Yeah.
You got to dig your feet in and drive off.
You got to get
right?
low. You got to get low and you got to drive. Yeah.
Same thing. We're not seeing that, but because they're moving their feet, and most of them are naturally athletic, talented players to begin with, they're playing, as we said 2 weeks ago, this is a stretch where the defenses they play are garbage. So you can get away with things against them that you couldn't get away with against Wisconsin.
That's a good point.
So they're not as necessarily as good as the numbers show, partly because last night we saw one of the best running back performances I've ever seen from a Notre Dame running back, like ever, which I grew up in the 90s with Reggie Brooks and Jerome Bettis and Autry Denson, and, you know, in late 80s with Ricky Waters, and you know what I mean? I've seen some pretty good running backs in my day. And then there's older folks that have seen Vegas Ferguson and Alan Pinkett, right? I didn't see Alan Pinkett. I didn't see Vegas Ferguson. From me, it's 88 on. That was, to me, one of the 5 best individual game performances that I've seen from a Notre Dame running back. So that helped, but I still like the improvement. I think that the run game, they didn't have as many mistakes as they had in pass pro from an assignment correctness standpoint, right? I didn't think so. They moved their feet, kept a body on a body, and they let Kyron and Logan Diggs do their thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that was key.
The effort was there, no question about it.
Yeah.
And to be honest with you, if you get performances like you did from Kyron Williams, and I cannot expect him to do what he did last night every game. That's not possible.
The last 3 weeks, he's in a zone right now.
He's in a zone. There's no doubt about it. But if you have somebody that's even performing at 80% of what Kyron Williams did behind you, stalemates will work. I mean, and I'm not saying it's okay.
It's also the nature of this game because they are running so much zone, and you know that's the thing is you're not opening a hole right here. It's not an A gap run. It's a
right. And Brian Kelly talked about it in the post game. They run duo where it's just double teams across the board.
Right.
Okay.
It's basically a zone play. It's their zone
that's
play,
exactly what it is. That's exactly right. And they're getting better at those, by the way. And I agree with your comment from last night. They are getting better at that.
The timing was better, yeah.
But if they can just be average again, get those stalemates, the guy behind him is going to be doing pretty good.
Yeah.
I want to bring up, there's a super chat that I want to bring up in a second, but I also want to bring up this from Sawyer. He says, I listened to the game on the radio and the commentators on Sirius, and there's only one radio broadcast team, obviously, Burmeister and Ryan Harris.
Mm-hmm.
And they were acting like Kane Madden was having an amazing night. True. No. Not true, I will say. And Tommy Gunn's answered it. He goes, fact check, false, which I think is fantastic.
Pro Football Focus also had him ranked as the number 2 player. Here's the funny. You want to know why I don't take Pro Football Focus seriously? Oh my gosh. Kyron Williams was their 3rd ranked player for Notre Dame last night. Jack Cohn 1, Kane Madden 2, Kyron Williams.
Kane Madden 2?
3. Yeah.
And I will also say that Mike Tirico on the TV broadcast at one point, after Kane Madden had the false start, and then Patterson had the illegal snap.
Yeah, the snap.
He said, 2 of the I can't remember his exact words, but he's 2 of the most steady linemen that they have, making some early mistakes. And I'm like, well, if you're setting the bar down here,
Mike Tirico's not breaking down film.
No, he's not.
Mike Tirico's talking to and that's not a knock on Mike. That's not his job. That's Drew Brees' job.
Correct.
He's going with what the Notre Dame coaches tell him.
And Drew Brees isn't going to just knock a kid on the air either. Right. I mean, that's not really his gig.
So let's talk about some of the standouts, and let's talk about Kane Madden, because you and I are probably going to disagree a little bit again on him. But let me answer the question why I think people tend to over focus on Kane Madden, because Kane Madden is their strongest lineman. When he has a good block, it's much more noticeable. Whereas Andrew Kristofic's kind of just getting on a guy and it's just, getting in his way. He had a really nice block on an inside zone that Kyron cut right behind him, but they're not blowing people up.
No,
right?
They're not.
It's what happens in high school. I've said this before. If you go back and look at rankings, I'd be willing to bet that the offensive line is one of the positions where they miss the most.
Sure.
And I think one of the reasons for that is because they fall in love with these big kids that are just so much bigger and stronger than everybody else, and they have these really dominating blocks.
Yeah. Yep.
And they don't look at other things. And I think with Kane Madden, I think that there's one of two things happening with him. One is there's people that are like, to me with Pro Football Focus, they're just, whenever they can kind of, they don't want to admit that maybe they were wrong on something
that they missed,
so maybe that's it. I don't know. But I think people that kind of had a higher opinion of Kane Madden coming in are going to look at the things he does well, and when he has good moments, say, "Oh, see, really good job." The people that don't like Kane Madden, and I'm not pointing any fingers at anybody, are gonna sort of be a little bit hypercritical of him, and so what I'm trying to do is kind of just really evaluate it, and I felt last night my assessment was fair. I think he was really inconsistent in the first half. I think he settled in the second half, and after that no non-hold call, I thought he had probably his best half of football for a Notre Dame player last night in the second half. And I think the fourth quarter was a Kane Madden game in that you're playing power football and you're not asking him to move. You're asking him to come off and be physical. And he had some really impressive blocks. I mean,
there's no question.
He had a red zone block where he hit a guy and drove him, 6-7 yards into the end, not 6-7 yards into the end zone, but 6-7 yards ended up in the end zone. I thought he had some good blocks last night in the run game. I think his issues were more pass game related in picking up the twists and stunts.
Yes.
And then he stopped his feet a few too many times, got beat up the field, including the play where he should have got called for holding. But I don't think Kane Madden played a great game, but I also don't think he played a bad game. I think he had a solid game that had 6 or 7 very glaring mistakes. But overall,
and those are the ones that I remember.
Solid. Right.
Like those are the ones that jump out at me.
But that's my point, though, is I think you're being a little hypercritical of him.
I get that.
Because I think we're still both trying to figure out the absurdity of which the preseason hype around him was. And I think you're also kind of maybe taking some frustration out on that we have for Brian Kelly on Kane. I think maybe that's it. I'm not trying. But I don't think he was as bad as you think he was, and he definitely wasn't as good. And I'm not saying that what Ryan Harris said he was, because I love Ryan. I think Ryan does a great job. His analysis is really good. I didn't listen to it, so I don't know what he said. So I'm not going to speak on that. But I do know there are people that are acting as if he had a great game last night. He didn't have a great game last night, but he didn't have a bad game either. He was solid.
Sure.
Just has a little bit he has to clean up.
I'll give you that.
Opinion. What were your thoughts on his play?
Well, again, those 6 to 7 plays that were glaring are what stick out in my head. And that's, unfortunately, as an offensive lineman, for me, in my opinion, you can't have those mistakes and for me to think that you have a good game. And that's unfair. It's totally unfair because that's the problem with being an offensive lineman. When you're noticed, it's when you're not playing well or when you are driving a guy 7 yards down the field, right? Mm-hmm. And I acknowledge that that's not fair. Like, I want to go get on the couch and like sit back. I feel like you were giving me some therapy there, which I appreciate because I am hard on him and I have a preconceived notion of him and how he plays. And whenever I see him mess up, it's like, yep, there it is. He's just not good. He shouldn't be in, etc. Now, I will say that I did see some good things from him. Again, and I said this last week, when he's asked to down block and he doesn't have to move and get in space, he's really good.
That's why his second half was so good.
Because they allowed him to do what he does well.
Right.
And I will appreciate that and I will concede that. My problem is he's not well-rounded enough to do everything that you need him to do as a 6th-year player on this team. Mm-hmm. And so that's where I'm at. And I will also
and you're
agree
also
with
going to grade him stricter than you will Andrew Kristofic, because Andrew Kristofic is making a second start. Kane Madden's in his 30s.
Exactly.
Just like Josh Slug should be held to a higher standard
because
than
he's at his
Joe
15th start.
Right.
I mean,
16th actually last
16th.
night.
Yeah. So I mean, that's how it goes. I mean, you're gonna grade somebody harsher when they have more experience, right? And I said it last week, and I'll say it again. I do give the left side a little bit more of a pass than I do the right side, right? Because they have over 45 career starts or whatever it is combined, and the other two have 4 or whatever, like so. So yeah, I see improvement, which is important, because as a whole, as long as they keep improving, I'm going to be happy. And they are improving. And so that's good. They just have to work on certain things, like letting guys come on a free release and punishing your quarterback.
Happened in his gap twice early in the game.
Correct. Yes.
So that's where my issues were for him. That's what's funny is he got the number 2 overall grade, but he had the worst pass blocking grade.
How does that work?
Somebody had said it before. I think it was Kenny Moore said it, but like their grades are just like the most bizarre. Like, I don't have a clue how you could, like, I've seen, they had a guy last year who like every individual grade was lower than his season long grade. That makes no sense.
That's math.
That's why we rarely bring up Pro Football Focus anymore, to be honest with you.
Goodness.
I thought Josh Lugg had a good game. Real good, steady game.
Yeah.
No mistakes.
He never stood out to me in a negative way as I was watching the film back.
I thought Joe Alt was solid. He was steady. I thought Andrew Kristofic was solid. He was steady. There was a couple times he kind of stopped his feet and got beat inside, but then he recovered. He's just got to be more consistent driving through, because he's not the thing that Joe and Andrew and even Jarrett Patterson don't have, the Kane Madden does, is when he gets on you, he's so strong he can just kind of move you a little bit.
Right.
They need to have the proper leverage and technique.
Agreed.
I thought Jarrett Patterson
was a little bit.
I thought he was pretty good last night when he was working combos. I don't think he was as good in base blocks. I thought he was catching a little bit too much last night.
Yep. He got pushed back a couple times, and it affected the pocket.
Right. And that's it's a technique thing. I mean, his technique's not where it needs to be. And, I don't know if he's, well, we don't need to get into that. We know why that's the case. But I thought overall, as a whole, nobody played great. Nobody played bad. I just thought overall they were okay. They had a solid game last night, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So,
yep. That's what I've been asking for. Look, I can't. Look
what, like you, Vince. This is what we said. If look, because of who you have at running back,
right?
And we didn't even see Chris Tyree play. By the way, I did some digging today. There is no doghouse for Chris Tyree. It is just genuinely his workload is super low right now because he didn't practice till late in the week.
Which makes sense.
And so they felt comfortable enough letting him return kicks, especially since they knew he probably wasn't going to get much of a chance to return one the way that Carolina's kicker had been this season.
Yeah.
But they're hoping that it's basically what I was told was as soon as he's healthy, he's going to be back in the mix.
Good.
Hopefully that means that they're going to start playing 3 running backs and not just one. Because I'm going to tell you something right now. Last couple games, Kyron has said to come off because he got a little dinged. And this happened to him late last year too. Remember the BC game? And he wasn't quite the same down the stretch because he was – this next game would be a really good one if Chris Tyree is back to say, hey, Kyron, you're playing phenomenal. Let's get you some work early, but let's make sure we're getting Logan and
then you got Tyree and Diggs because I've been very impressed with Logan Diggs as he's gotten his opportunity. And you never wanted to see somebody get hurt. I would never want to see Chris Tyree get hurt. He's too dynamic. You want him on the field, but it's allowed Logan Diggs to get on the field more and prove that he belongs on the field, which I think is fantastic. And you can say the same thing about Styles as well. I mean, because of injuries and defections and, whatever, he is forced on the field. And they're seeing what he can do in practice now because he's actually practicing with the ones and he's getting his opportunity. And then they're like, wow, we got to get this guy involved. And they are. And it's awesome. And I'm so happy that it's happening, even though it's happening probably even though they didn't want it to happen with both those guys. But I'm super excited that it has happened. And I don't care the reason why.
Yeah. Couple more super chats here. Daniel Wade asks, does the QB shuffle have a big enough impact on offensive rhythm? If so, how much and in what way or ways? So this was kind of what Vince was referring to earlier. A quarterback shuffle doesn't impact the flow of the offense just because it's a quarterback rotation. What happens is if there's not a clear-cut plan, meaning, and this is where I think, even though we can nitpick a couple, like I would have had Tyler in on that one drive where they were inside the 5 and they had Jack, and you had the one where you think they should have, but we can nit because that's what the show's about, right? I mean, we're trying to apply a critical lens to the game so that people can understand the game through a coach's eyes as much as possible. That's what Irish Breakdown is all about. Some people don't understand that and they hit the dislike button because they just want to hear a show where Brian Kelly's so great and everything is awesome. And it's my fault that they gave up 34 points last night. Right. So anyway, that's what we're trying to do. But in theory, big picture, I think why the offense has worked so well the last 2 weeks is because of exactly what it should have been from the beginning. And that was, this is Jack Cohn's offense, but Tyler's too good not to play. And you have to come with a very clear, defined plan of attack that the quarterbacks understand and the team understands. So they know when we do this, we know Tyler's coming in and this is what we're running. And then when Jack's in there, and we know when he's going to be in there, we've seen that the last 2 games. I think it's been, again, I can nitpick here or there, but there's been a purpose, a clear, like before it's just like, gee, we need a spark on the offense. Let's throw Tyler in there and give him a series, as we mentioned earlier. And then Jack sits, and then the offense goes down and scores. Hey, it's great. Then the defense has a whole series, and then Jack finally goes back in, and it's been a half an hour of real time or 20 minutes of real time that he hasn't played football. And that's not good. And then Tyler goes in, leads you on a touchdown, and then you don't see him again for 45 minutes of real time. Now, when I say real time, I'm talking about like real life. My body is right. So a football game is 60 minutes, but it's really 3 hours.
Yeah.
So I'm talking like the real time of the 3-hour long game where you haven't played and your body gets out of rhythm. You're not seeing the game. You're not out there experiencing what's going on. And so what I've loved the game. I've loved the manner in which they've used them the last 2 weeks. And yes, you're going to run more when Tyler's in the game, but you can't just play the run.
Exactly.
And he's much more dangerous in those instances than when he is the guy, like we saw against Virginia Tech, and they can build their defensive game plan around stopping him. Because he doesn't play enough that you can spend 40% of your time on the Tyler Buchner game plan, because he's not going to get 40% of the reps.
Right.
And I think that makes Notre Dame more dangerous. So in theory, it does not have to impact the offensive rhythm. And it could impact it a ton if there's not a clear plan of attack and a clear purpose and one that everyone understands. That's when it was messing up the rhythm. So Daniel, that's a great question. I appreciate the super chat, and I hopefully that answers your question as to why it does or doesn't. And I think we're seeing the last 2 games that, and we're seeing all season, that a 2-quarterback system can be really bad if not used correctly. A 2-quarterback system can be really good if you have 2 players with different skills that you use correctly. But here's the thing, you've got to have a guy. Everyone's got to know who your leader is.
Correct.
And for the first time since really the first game of the year, that's not a doubt. And I think that it's not a surprise that in 3 games, and I'm not talking about what we knew going in, but how the game played out, there's been 3 games where there was no doubt from start to finish who the quarterback is. It's Jack Cohn. 3 times I think you could argue we've seen that this year. Florida State, USC, North Carolina. Notre Dame's averaging about 40 points a game in those 3 games.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right?
And he, like we said at the top of the show, he's playing with the most confidence in the last 2 games than I've seen him play with all season, maybe with respect to Florida State. But we're seeing it consistently now. And stepping into throws when you know you're going to get face planted it is a tell sign of confidence, right? The fact that he took off and ran for the end zone is a tell of confidence.
Yeah.
Okay.
He's got some swagger back. Last night, honestly, with the exception of he's still aiming his deep balls. And what I mean by that is he's not ripping it. He's still acting like he's throwing to Wisconsin receivers. He's not. He's got to let it rip. You can watch it. It's all arm. It's all arm, Vince. He's not driving off his back foot. He's not getting his core involved at all in the throw. It's all arm, and it comes off nice, but then it hangs up a little bit because he's aiming it. He's got to just launch it, let those guys run underneath it. Still needs to be caught. But other than that, this last night was the Jack Cohn that we expected to see.
Agreed.
This is the Jack Cohn that I thought if the Florida State version and this version now, the key is going to be he's going to have to continue that.
Absolutely.
And good coaches, and I don't know how many of those they play moving forward because the rest of the defenses they play are pretty awful.
Absolutely.
Good coaches are going to see, okay, how do we attack that and find a way to attack it? Hopefully that they'll be prepared to handle that.
But you know what? I'm okay with the fact that they're not playing great defenses. I mean, obviously that gives the offense an opportunity to get better, but it will give them confidence, period. Because there was a high school team that we always played against that, like, for the first 6 games of the season, they just played garbage teams. Okay. Mm-hmm. And they were 6-0, right? And we're playing this tough schedule and we're lucky to be 500. And then we play them in week 7. And you know who has all the confidence? That team that's 6-0.
Right.
And it didn't matter that they were just feasted on garbage. Mm-hmm. They're 6-0. They're undefeated. Right. Like, there's something to be said for confidence.
Yep.
I'm telling you, Cohn is playing with confidence. His offense is starting to play with confidence. And if they can keep this rolling, whatever they draw in the postseason, whether it's a playoff, whether it's New Year's 6 or whatever, they're going to go into that with confidence.
If they can keep doing this.
If they can
and
keep doing it.
It's because when you are an offensive line, for example, and this is the key, and look, we know if we give Jack time, he's going to shred. And we know if we can just get a body on a body, Kyron's going to go off.
Yeah.
It gives you so much more sense of purpose as a line. And we're seeing that. Like, hey, if you do your job, this is what Kyron's going to do.
Right.
And you know, I've talked a lot about how, you know, I say, you know, Kyron's not a top 5 captain and all this because, again, I think, you know, we're kind of living in the moment, and I'm not trying to get into that, but here's the reason he's a great captain this year. You never saw Kyron Williams publicly show up his terrible offensive line.
Right.
Ever.
Agreed.
And if any player ever had a reason to show up as teammates, it was Kyron. And that leadership is why they kept battling and battling and battling. And you can just see the way they react when he gets big runs, right? And you can see the way he treats his teammates when he does those things. And that to me is a really big part of what makes him, you want to play for a guy like that. Like, honestly, I've seen this, not myself, but I've been on team, like meaning me, but I've been on teams as a coach and as a player where you had this running back that's just a giant prick.
Yeah.
And he just, you know, you'd block 10 straight times. And the one time he gets hit, he's in your face, throwing the ball. It's like, you know what? I think I'm going to let this guy through this time.
We've had lookout blocks before.
You know, but the point is, but when you have a kid like Kyron and like Jack, and Jack's quiet, Jack doesn't get in. I mean, again, Jack Cohn's another person who could have had every reason in the world to get in his line's face and say, stop. I'm sick of getting hit in the effing face.
I mean,
you know what I mean? Like, do your stinking job,
right.
You know, but he never did.
Yeah.
And that is why the line has been able to play through how terrible it was for 6 games, 5 games, and keep getting better because the leaders kept saying, hey, just keep working. Now, again, it's helped that they're playing a bad part of the schedule. But look, Toledo wasn't any great shakes either.
Right.
Neither was Florida State, you know, and they still play terrible. So they're genuinely getting better.
Yes, agreed.
It's not just because of the poor play. So
I completely agree.
That's my sense on that. And then we have a super chat from Sawyer Leonard. This show is so awesome. Thank you for the super chat, Sawyer. I haven't signed up for the message board yet because I literally don't have enough time in the day after the YouTube shows. Thanks, gentlemen, for the awesome content. And we'll get you over there one of these days. We'll get you. But we just are happy you're part of our community. And our community isn't the message board and then everybody else. It's everybody that comes in here. So we appreciate your super chat.
Got one more from Patrick down there if you want to hit that.
We do?
Yes, we do.
Okay, you saw his there you go. Patrick Barnes, thank you for the super chat. Did y'all hear Kelly say that we were dumb for not changing the offense to Cohn's strengths sooner?
Yeah.
Did he really say that?
He said that a week ago. Basically, for the most part. He said, I wish I was smarter for not coming up with this sooner, coming off the bye week. And then
did he say sarcastically?
And then literally Cone gets up next and he's like, yeah, man, I used to run this in high school and it was great and blah, blah, blah. Like,
yeah, because that was then a week before Kelly was talking about how he'd never run that before.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
It's like, come on, man, just talk.
Y'all want to know why I don't pay attention to Brian Kelly's press conferences anymore?
Right.
That's exactly why.
Exactly. Like, talk to the kid for 45 seconds.
This is why he needs to listen to the Irish Breakdown podcast. Vince, he'd have known this back in March if he would have paid attention to our show. That's all I'm saying. And there are people that are going to take that seriously, and I'm mostly kidding. Mostly. So